Make me a captive, Lord, and then I shall be free. Force me to render up my sword, and I shall conqueror be. I sink in life's alarms, when by myself I stand. Imprison me within thine arms, and strong shall be my hand. At the heart of this week's hymn for reflection is the paradox that to be captive to the Christian way of life is in fact to be truly free. And in many senses, to be freed from the flights of life's fancies and fashions is to be enslaved to a way of life that brings true happiness and contentment. Few hymns capture the paradoxical nature of Christian faith as well as this one. The first verse contains three profound paradoxes of Christian living. When I become captive to Christ, then I shall be free. If I render up the sword of my desires, then I shall be a conqueror. And when one is most vulnerable, or as Matheson puts it, sink in life's alarms, we become strong when we're imprisoned in the shelter of God's arms. No doubt it was George Matheson's life experience and his ability as a poet that led to his use of paradox in this hymn. Born in 1842 in Glasgow, he was nearly blind by the age of 18, and yet despite these obvious challenges, he became a brilliant student at Glasgow University. He knew suffering all right, not least the loss of his fiancée due to his growing blindness. George Matheson was ordained a minister of the Kirk at Ellon, near Dunoon, where he served for nearly 20 years before moving to St Bernard's, an Edinburgh congregation of over 2,000. As well as a fruitful career in the ministry, he also wrote several books on theology, devotional materials, and of course his popular volume of poetry, Sacred Songs, published in 1890. He went on to be awarded honorary doctorates from both Aberdeen and Edinburgh University for his works. Perhaps the context for this hymn comes from the paradox itself that a nearly blind man in 19th century Scotland became, according to the hymnologist William Reynolds, widely known and greatly respected as one of the most outstanding Scottish Presbyterian ministers of his day and generation. Matheson's hymn appears in the collection Sacred Songs under the title Christian Freedom, with the heading Paul the Prisoner of Jesus Christ. In Ephesians 3 verse 1, the chapter begins, "For this cause I, Paul, prisoner of Jesus Christ, for you Gentiles." As any reader of the New Testament can bear witness to, Paul's writings are also full of paradox. Indeed, some would say Paul himself was a bit of a paradox. Remember, he started as Saul, the persecutor of Christians, and yet he was chosen by God to be the apostle who brought faith to so many people, Gentiles included. Paul was a Jew, and yet he was the apostle to the Gentile world. The epistles to these Christian communities found in the New Testament are replete with the language of paradox. In Ephesians 2, we read that Gentiles who were aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, strangers from the covenant of promise, having no hope, without God in the world, are now no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and part of the household of God. In following Jesus, Paul had come to terms with his own inadequacies and had come to appreciate the love and grace of God in his own life. And so that he, more than any other figure in the early church, understood that this could be true then, not just for him, but for anyone and everyone. In our hymn, the paradoxes continue. In the second verse, a weak and poor heart is strengthened with the matchless love of Christ. In the third verse, there's the acknowledgement that we have no power until in fact we learn to serve other people. The final verse continues in this vein. My will is not mine own, until thou hast made it thine. It's Matheson's use of paradox that the member of Queen's Cross who chose this hymn so greatly admires, together with Matheson's honest assessment of the fragility of our human condition and how much we have to gain from that love, grace and strength of God. I've no doubt that's a sentiment that many of us who try, not always successfully, to live the way of Jesus will know ourselves and share. Together, though, with the realization that to seek this way of life, to live this particular way, might look to some restricting or limiting, but in fact it's quite the opposite. It's a liberating way to live, and it brings a life full of reward in a way that's quite difficult to put into words. At Queen's Cross, at least, we sing this hymn to J.S. Bach's stirring tune, Ich halt terug stil, a tune which is better, in my humble opinion, than the tune found in most hymnals, including CH4, Leo Minster. My thanks, as always, to those who choose these hymns, to our Director of Music, Ewan Ritchie, and our visuals producer, Callum Stewart, for their generous help and support every week with this series of reflections. Please enjoy this wonderful hymn. Make me a captive, Lord, and then I shall be free.